The first time I heard that I'd stolen from my grandfather, there were already 12 people nodding along like it was common knowledge. I was standing in the fellowship hall of a church outside Cedar Ridge, Missouri, balancing a paper plate of potato salad I hadn't touched. The accusation wasn't even directed at me. That was the strange part. My Aunt Denise was speaking to someone else. I always wondered where all that money went. A pause. Then she lowered her voice just enough to sound secretive and loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Now we know." The woman beside her glanced toward me, then another, then another. That uncomfortable ripple moved through the room. The kind where nobody says your name, but everybody suddenly knows you're the topic. I felt the air change. The conversations around me didn't stop. They simply adjusted. People looked away too quickly. Others looked a second too long. A few stopped smiling altogether. I stood there holding that paper plate while my grandfather's memorial luncheon continued around me. The smell of coffee filled the room. Metal folding chairs scraped across the floor. Someone laughed near the dessert table, and somehow I already knew. Something had started, something bigger than gossip, because Denise wasn't the kind of person who hinted. She was the kind who planted ideas and let other people spread them. I slowly set the plate down. Across the room, my mother was watching me, not helping, not correcting anything, just watching. And for a second, our eyes met. She immediately looked away. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Because innocent people usually defend you. At minimum, they act surprised. My mother looked prepared, as if she'd already heard this story, as if she'd been hearing it for days, maybe longer. I didn't confront anyone. Not then. I simply walked outside. The October air felt cold against my face. The parking lot was crowded. Cars lined both sides of the gravel drive. I stood beside my sedan and stared toward the church doors. Something wasn't right. Grandpa hadn't even been buried yet. His obituary had only been published 3 days earlier. The estate paperwork wasn't finalized. Probate hadn't begun. Nothing had happened. No money had moved. No distributions existed. No accounts had been closed. I knew that because I was the executor. I had every document, every statement. Which meant one thing. Whoever started this accusation wasn't confused. They were lying, and they knew they were lying. The question was why, and unfortunately, I already suspected the answer. Because 3 weeks earlier, my mother had asked me for something she should never have asked. Something illegal. Something she assumed I'd quietly do. And when I refused, everything started changing, but at that moment, standing in the church parking lot, I still didn't understand how far she was willing to go. Or how many people she was willing to drag into it. And I definitely didn't know my grandfather had anticipated all of it. Because he'd left behind something nobody else knew existed. Something sitting quietly inside a locked file cabinet. Something that would eventually turn an entire family gathering silent. But that comes later. First, you need to understand how we got here. And trust me, the story everyone believed wasn't even close to the truth. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask something. If you're listening, I'd genuinely love to know where you're watching from. One thing I've learned from sharing stories like this is how many people recognize pieces of their own families inside them. And if family drama, inheritance battles, and quiet forms of justice are your kind of stories, subscribe and stay a while. Because this one started with paperwork, but it ended with 23 relatives realizing they had accused the wrong person. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 32. I live in a small town outside Cedar Ridge, Missouri. And until last year, I thought my family was complicated but functional. Not healthy, not particularly close, but functional. The kind of family where people complained about each other constantly but still showed up for holidays. The kind where everyone had unofficial roles. My mother, Patricia, managed appearances. My father, Wayne, avoided conflict until it became impossible. My Aunt Denise collected information like trophies. My cousins floated between alliances depending on convenience. And my grandfather, Harold Morgan, quietly saw through all of it. He rarely argued, rarely interfered, rarely raised his voice. But he noticed everything, especially money. Grandpa spent 42 years running a hardware business. He trusted documentation more than people. If he loaned someone $50, he wrote it down. If he paid a contractor, he kept receipts. If he promised something verbally, he'd follow it with a letter. Growing up, we joked about it. Now I understand why. Records don't forget. People do. Or at least they pretend to. I became a bookkeeper almost by accident. After community college, I started working for a regional construction company. Numbers made sense to me. They behaved. People didn't. Over the years, Grandpa and I developed an easy relationship. Nothing dramatic, nothing sentimental. We simply trusted each other. Sometimes I'd help organize his files. Sometimes we'd drink coffee on his porch. Sometimes he'd ask my opinion about paperwork. That was it. No secret favorite grandchild situation. No emotional movie scenes. Just trust. When he updated his SD plan 6 years ago, he asked whether I'd be willing to serve as executor. I remember laughing. "Are you trying to make everybody hate me?" He smiled. "Only temporarily." "Why me?" "Because you'll do it correctly." That was his answer, nothing more, and honestly, I didn't think much about it. People name executors all the time. Most estates aren't dramatic. Most families survive them. At least that's what I thought. Then Grandpa's health declined. Slowly at first, then faster. The last year was difficult. Doctor visits increased. Hospital stays became more frequent. Family members appeared more often. And that's when I noticed the first crack, not around grief, around money. One evening after a hospital visit, my mother called me. "Have you seen the estate documents recently?" The question felt odd. Why? "Oh, no reason." A pause. Then another, "Just wondering." I remember staring at my phone. Mom wasn't curious about legal documents, ever. "What exactly are you asking?" She laughed. "Nothing." Then she changed the subject. At the time, I let it go. Then, over the next several months, similar conversations started appearing. Casual questions. Questions disguised as concern. How much is probate going to cost? Who controls accounts after someone passes? How long before assets are distributed? None of it seemed important individually. Together, it felt strange. I started paying attention. And the more attention I paid, the more I noticed something else. Certain relatives weren't worried about Grandpa. They were worried about what happened afterward. One Sunday afternoon, I arrived early for lunch at my parents' house. The front door was slightly open. As I walked in, voices drifted from the kitchen. Mom, Dad, and Aunt Denise. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then I heard my name. "She doesn't have to know everything," Denise said. Dad answered first. "That's risky," Mom sighed. "Not if it's temporary." I stepped into the doorway. 3 faces turned toward me. Silence first. Mom said, "Oh, you're early." I smiled. "Apparently." Nobody explained the conversation. Nobody volunteered context. Lunch proceeded normally, at least on the surface. But that was the first time I felt genuinely uneasy. Because people only hide things when they know they're wrong. The problem was I still didn't know what they were hiding. Not yet. That answer arrived 6 weeks before Grandpa died directly from my mother. The day she asked me to commit fraud. She invited me over on a Wednesday evening. Just me, no reason given. When I arrived, she already had coffee waiting. Mom wasn't nurturing. Hospitality usually meant an agenda. We sat at the kitchen table. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon candles. For several minutes, we discussed normal things. Work, weather, Grandpa's health. Then she folded her hands. "Claire, I need a favor." I waited. "Your father and I are behind on the mortgage." That wasn't what I expected. "How behind?" "Several months." Several months turned out to mean nearly 10. The number shocked me. My parents weren't wealthy, but they weren't irresponsible either. At least not historically. What happened? Dad's contracting jobs had slowed. Credit cards filled the gaps. Then interest accumulated, then more debt. A familiar story, an unfortunate one. Still, it wasn't my business. Until Mom continued. "Once your grandfather passes," I felt myself stiffen, "there should be enough available to help." I set my coffee down. "What exactly are you asking?" The sentence that started everything. "Just advance us the money." I stared at her. "What? Temporarily? That's not how estates work. Nobody would know." I almost laughed because it was absurd. "Mom, Claire, listen. No, let me finish. You want me to take estate money before probate. Only temporarily. That's illegal." Her expression hardened immediately. The softness disappeared. I am your mother, and I'm executor. Family should help family. No, it's not appropriate now. Silence. Rain continued tapping outside. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Mom stared at me, not disappointed. Angry. I didn't think you'd leave us hanging. I didn't think you'd ask. That landed badly, very badly. She stood. So that's your answer? Yes. Interesting. Come on, Mom. I tried to not escalate. She instantly shook her head. Don't, such a harmless word. Yet somehow it sounded like a threat. I left 15 minutes later. The conversation ended politely. And during the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Not resolved. Shifted. Like a door quietly closing somewhere behind me. I wish I'd trusted that feeling more. Because after that night, the rumors began. Small at first. Questions, odd reactions, nothing concrete, just enough to make me wonder. Then Grandpa died, and everything accelerated. The memorial was only the beginning. What happened after the funeral was when I realized this wasn't gossip anymore. Someone was building a case against me, one relative at a time. And the first real proof arrived in the form of a text message from a cousin who still thought we were on the same side. A text that made my hands go cold the moment I read it. Because for the first time, I saw exactly what people were saying, and exactly who had started it. The text came in at 9:14 p.m. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop open, trying to go through Grandpa's expense records for what felt like the 100th time. Probate hadn't officially opened yet, but I was already preparing the file structure. Old habit. Bookkeeping brain, control what you can before everything gets messy. My phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time from Ethan, my cousin. I almost didn't open it. We weren't close. Ethan was one of those relatives who only appeared at holidays and funerals, usually with opinions no one asked for. But something about the timing made my stomach tighten. I unlocked the screen. The first message said, "You should probably see what people are saying about you." Second message, "I didn't believe it at first." Third message, "But it's everywhere, Claire." My hands went still. Everywhere wasn't a casual word in a family like mine. It meant group chats, Facebook posts. I typed back, "What are you talking about?" 3 dots appeared immediately. Ethan was already waiting. "They're saying you took money from Grandpa before he died." Then another message, slower this time, like he didn't want to send it but couldn't stop himself. "Mom says you were handling things too freely." I stared at the screen. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was calculation. Because that phrase, handling things too freely, was not something Ethan would naturally say. That sounded like someone had fed him the wording. Carefully, I stood up without realizing it, walked to the kitchen, turned on the light I didn't need, then came back, read it again. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan, are you going to respond to them? People are saying you basically emptied accounts before probate." Probate hadn't even started. Legally, there were no distributable funds. Nothing could be emptied. Which meant whoever was spreading this either didn't understand the process or didn't care. Or worse, they knew exactly what they were doing and were relying on other people not understanding. I sat back down slowly, typed, "That's not possible." Ethan responded almost instantly. "I know, that's what I said." Then a pause. "This is getting ugly, Claire. Aunt Denise is the one pushing it the most." I closed my eyes for a second. I was starting to see the shape of it. Denise didn't argue. She constructed narratives. And once she built one, she didn't need proof. She just needed repetition. My phone buzzed again. This time, a screenshot. A Facebook post. My cousin had circled my name. Under it, a comment thread. I opened it and felt something in me go still in a different way. The words weren't random. They were coordinated. She was always close to him near the end. She handled his accounts. She had full access. And now suddenly she's the executor. One comment stood out. "People like that always take advantage when someone is dying." People like that. No name needed anymore, just implication. I put the phone down. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside my head, something was shifting into place. This wasn't spontaneous grief gossip. This was accusation. The next morning, I woke up to 6 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from Denise. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't call back. Instead, I drove to Grandpa's house. It was still technically part of the estate. Empty now. Locked. The kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. I let myself in with the spare key. The air inside smelled like old wood and paper. Like him. I stood in the hallway for a moment before moving. Every step felt deliberate. I went straight to his office. The filing cabinets were still exactly as I left them. Neat. Labeled. Controlled. I opened the top drawer, bank statements. The second, property records. The third, estate planning documents. Everything was intact, nothing missing. No one had physically accessed this space, yet they were accusing me of manipulating it. I sat at his desk and opened my laptop. Logged into the shared estate folder. Everything matched. Every account balanced. Every entry traceable. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed. Which made the accusation not just false, but provably false. So why was it spreading so fast? My phone buzzed again. My father. I hesitated before answering. Yeah. His voice was tired, not angry. That was worse. Claire, your mother is upset. I almost laughed. That's what this is about? No. It's about what people are saying. People are lying. Another pause. They're saying you took money while he was still alive. That wasn't the original claim. That was an escalation. I stood up. Dad, listen to me carefully. Silence. I didn't take anything. Nothing has moved. Everything is documented. I know that. No, you don't, because if you did, this wouldn't even be a conversation. That landed. He exhaled. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. From who? Another pause. Your mother, the missing piece. I closed my eyes briefly, not surprised. Just confirmed. When I opened them again, my voice was quieter. Okay. I understand what's happening. Claire, but I already hung up, because now it wasn't confusion anymore. It was pattern recognition, and the pattern was clear. Mom wasn't just repeating rumors, she was feeding them. By the afternoon, the shift became public. At the grocery store, the cashier avoided eye contact. At the post office, a woman I barely knew stopped mid-conversation when I walked in. At the hardware store, where Grandpa used to spend half his mornings, the owner greeted me differently. Carefully. Measured. Like I was already convicted of something unofficial. No one confronted me directly. That's how these things work in small towns. Nobody needs to accuse you. They just need to act differently. And suddenly, you feel it everywhere. By the time I got home, my phone was almost unusable. Messages stacked faster than I could read them. Then Denise called. I answered. Silence on her end for a second. Then her voice came through. Not emotional, not uncertain. Controlled. We need to talk about the estate. I am not discussing anything through rumor channels. A soft laugh. Rumor channels? Yes. You mean family. That word again, family, always used like leverage. I mean people spreading false claims. False, she repeated. Then her tone changed slightly. Claire, everyone knows you had access. You were there constantly the last months. You were managing his accounts. I was assisting him, not controlling anything. Same thing to most people. Most people, not truth. Perception. I sat down slowly. Denise, if you have an issue, you can raise it legally through probate. A pause. Then she said something that made my stomach drop slightly. Oh, don't worry, that part is already moving. What part? You'll see. The call ended before I could respond. I stared at the phone. And for the first time, I felt something close to concern. Not about the accusation. About coordination. Because Denise didn't say things like that unless she was confident, which meant someone else was involved. Someone with influence. Someone who could push a narrative into something more formal. Something documented. Something that could actually affect the estate process. I stood up and walked back to Grandpa's office. Sat down again, looked at the files. And that's when I noticed it. A folder I hadn't paid attention to before. Plain, unmarked, tucked slightly behind the others. I opened it. Inside were copies of correspondence. Emails, letters, notes. Some of them were from Grandpa, some weren't. But one thing stood out immediately. Every single document referenced one theme. Concern about family disputes after death. My breath slowed slightly. Then I saw the date on the most recent note. It was written 6 months before he died, and it contained a sentence I wasn't prepared for. If disagreements arise regarding access or distribution, All actions must be verified through documented authority. No verbal requests are valid. At the bottom, his signature, and beneath it, a separate attachment reference, a file I had never seen before, labeled Executor Protection Addendum. I stared at it for a long moment, then whispered to myself, almost automatically, "What did you know, Grandpa?" Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a family rumor anymore. It felt like something he had already prepared for, something he expected. Something that meant I wasn't the only one keeping records. And whoever was pushing this narrative might be walking straight into something they didn't understand. The moment I saw the words Executor Protection Addendum, I didn't move for almost a full minute. Not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because I did. I kept the folder open on Grandpa's desk. The house was completely silent around me. Even the refrigerator hum felt distant. My phone was on the desk face down, vibrating intermittently like it had given up trying to get my attention politely. Then it stopped. Then started again. I didn't look. I pulled the printed note closer. Grandpa's handwriting was unmistakable, clean, slightly angled, precise even when rushed. If disagreements arise regarding access or distribution, my eyes slowed on each line. No verbal requests are valid. That wasn't a casual sentence. That was defensive architecture. Someone who expects pressure. Someone who expects manipulation. Someone who has already seen this family behave badly before. My throat tightened slightly, not emotional, just recognition settling in. Then I saw the reference code at the bottom again. A file attachment that didn't exist in my personal copies, which meant one thing. There was a system here I hadn't fully accessed yet, and I was the executor who didn't yet have the full map. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Unknown number. Text. You need to stop accessing estate materials without transparency. My stomach went still, because that wording wasn't family language. That was legal-adjacent phrasing. Institutional tone. I typed back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then, representing concerned parties regarding Harold Morgan's estate. Not a name, not a relative, a position. I leaned back slowly in the chair. So it had already escalated beyond gossip, beyond Denise, beyond my mother. This had moved into something structured enough that someone felt comfortable sending formal-sounding messages, which meant one of two things. Either they had already involved legal counsel, or they were pretending to. Either way, the situation had crossed a threshold, and I hadn't even received formal probate notice yet. I stood up, grabbed the folder, and left the house. The Cedar Ridge County Courthouse always smelled the same. Old paper, polished wood, and something faintly metallic that I never liked. I walked in without hesitation, which surprised even me a little. The clerk at the front looked up. "Can I help you? I need to check the probate filing status for Harold Morgan," she typed slowly, then paused, looked at me again. "You're named executor." That changed her posture immediately, not dramatically, but enough. The kind of shift people make when they realize a conversation now has legal weight. "One moment." She disappeared into the back. I stood there, holding the folder tighter than I realized. Around me, life continued normally. A man arguing quietly on the phone. A woman filling out forms with a pen that kept slipping. A child swinging their legs under a chair. Normal life. While mine had quietly become documentation warfare. The clerk returned with a printed sheet. "Probate filing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." I frowned. "That's fast," she nodded. "Petition was submitted early." My eyes lifted slightly. "Submitted by who?" Another pause. She scanned again. Then said it. "Patricia Morgan." My mother, of course. I didn't react outwardly. But internally something clicked into place. Because probate filings aren't just administrative steps. They define control of narrative, who speaks first, who frames the estate, who defines concerns. And my mother had moved first. Before I even knew there was a formal dispute, I thanked the clerk and walked out. The air outside felt sharper than before. My phone buzzed again before I even reached my car. This time, Denise calling. I answered. Not because I wanted to, but because avoiding it no longer changed anything. "Claire," she said immediately, "you need to be careful." "About what?" "The filing." "I know about it." A pause, then her tone shifted slightly. You've been accessing documents, haven't you? I stopped walking. That question wasn't casual. It was strategic. Why are you asking me that? Just answer. I'm the executor. Of course I've been accessing documents. Not those documents. My grip tightened on the phone. There's only one estate file. That's what you think. Click. She hung up. I stood there in the courthouse parking lot, slowly lowering the phone. Now things were no longer just emotional manipulation. Now they were implying hidden documentation, alternate filings, or worse, claims of mismanagement based on selectively presented records. This wasn't just rumor anymore. This was procedural escalation. And I was standing right in the middle of it without a full defense structure yet. I got into my car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked unchanged. That was the strange part. Nothing about me looked like what was happening inside my life. By evening, the tone of the town had shifted again. Not openly, never openly. That's not how places like Cedar Ridge work. It was subtler than that. At the diner, I didn't get my usual greeting. At the pharmacy, the cashier asked for ID I'd never been asked for before. At the gas station, the attendant didn't make eye contact. But the real confirmation came when I stopped at the post office. A small envelope was waiting for me. No return address, just my name. Inside was a copy of a printed Facebook post. Someone had physically printed it out. Highlighted sections, underlined sentences, and written in pen at the bottom, "Is this true?" The post itself wasn't new anymore. It had been shared across multiple local groups. But seeing it printed made it feel different, more official, more dangerous. It read, "Family of Harold Morgan raises concerns about executor handling estate funds prematurely." Below it were comments, some supportive, some openly accusatory. One stood out. "If this is true, she should be removed immediately." Removed. Not questioned. Not investigated. Removed. That word stayed with me longer than the rest, because it meant the narrative had evolved past doubt. It had become action-oriented. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in the envelope, then sat in my car for a long time without starting it. I was mapping, and the map now had multiple moving parts. My mother filing probate early. Denise escalating narrative pressure. A possible external, concerned party sending pseudo-legal messages, and a rapidly spreading reputation shift in the town. None of it was random. All of it was converging, which meant the next step wouldn't be emotional. It would be structural, legal, and that meant I needed counsel. I called the only attorney I trusted, Mason Clark, not family connected, not local gossip material, just a probate attorney in the next county who handled estate disputes quietly and efficiently. He answered on the second ring. "Claire, I need help." "What kind of help?" "There's a contested narrative forming around my grandfather's estate. It's escalating into formal probate conflict." A longer pause this time. "Have you filed yet?" "No, my mother filed today." Another pause. "On what basis?" "Allegations of mismanagement." I could hear him exhale through the phone. "Okay, I need you to do something very carefully. I'm listening. Do not engage any family discussion about assets, not verbally, not informally, not through messages. I haven't been. Good. Second, bring every document you have to me tomorrow morning. Everything. Even the things you think are irrelevant. I already have most of it organized." "That's good, but Claire," his tone shifted slightly. "Once probate is contested like this, it stops being family conflict. It becomes evidence management." That sentence settled heavily. Evidence management. Not grief. Not misunderstanding. Evidence. "I understand," I said. "Do you?" There was something in his voice I couldn't ignore. Not doubt exactly. Concern about what I didn't yet know. "I think so." "That's not enough. We're going to assume there's already a parallel narrative being constructed." "Parallel narrative?" "Yes." A pause. Then he added, "And if your mother filed first, she's already shaping the court's first impression." I looked out the car window, the courthouse still visible in the distance. "So what do I do?" "Stop reacting. Start documenting everything." That was it. Simple, direct, and terrifyingly insufficient feeling in the moment. But I knew he was right. I hung up and sat there for a while longer, then opened the glove compartment, pulled out a notebook. And for the first time since this started, I wrote something down by hand, not because I needed to remember it, but because I needed to see it as a sequence. Date, time, event, claim, response, pattern, and as I wrote, something became clearer with each line. This wasn't spiraling out of control. It was being guided, not by confusion, but by intent. And whoever was guiding it had made one critical assumption, that I would defend myself emotionally instead of structurally. They were wrong, but only if I moved fast enough. I closed the notebook, started the car. I didn't feel like I was inside a family argument. I felt like I was inside a case. By the time I got home that night, I just stood in the hallway with my shoes still on, holding the notebook I'd started in the car. On my phone, there were now 18 missed calls, mostly unknown numbers. A few family names I didn't feel like looking at yet, but one message stood out, from Mason Clark. "Urgent, call me before tomorrow morning." That was enough. I called him immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "Claire, good. Listen carefully." His tone had shifted from earlier. Now it was direct, focused. "I pulled preliminary filing records. Your mother didn't just file probate." I leaned against the wall. "What else did she do?" A pause, then. "She filed a petition of concern regarding executor conduct." I blinked. "That sounds formal." "It is, and it's strategic." I didn't answer immediately, because I understood what that meant in practice. It wasn't just opening probate. It was pre-framing me as questionable before the estate even began distribution review. Mason continued. "She's essentially asking the court to treat you as a potentially compromised executor from day one." I slowly sat down on the floor in the hallway. "On what basis?" "That's where it gets interesting." A pause. "She's citing irregular financial handling during end-of-life care period." My jaw tightened slightly. "There was no irregular handling." "I know. But Claire," his voice dropped slightly, "these petitions don't need proof to start the process. They just need plausibility." Plausibility. Not truth, not evidence. Plausibility. That word stuck. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now it gets reviewed. And if the judge finds the claim plausible enough, they can restrict your access to estate accounts temporarily." My stomach went still. "Temporarily?" "Until investigation clears it." "And how long does that take?" Another pause. "That depends on how loud the case becomes." I closed my eyes. So that was the strategy, not immediate victory. Delay, pressure, reputation erosion. If they couldn't take control of the estate directly, they would slow me down enough to make me look incompetent or suspicious in the process. I exhaled slowly. "I need to know something," I said. "Go ahead. Is this normal in family disputes?" Mason didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me more than anything he could have said quickly. "No," he finally said. "Not at this speed, not with this coordination." I opened my eyes. "Coordination?" "Yes." A pause. "Multiple filings, synchronized narrative claims, and external messaging about concerned parties that doesn't happen organically in most estate disputes." I looked down at my notebook. The pattern I'd been writing suddenly felt heavier. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying someone is organizing this beyond just emotional family conflict." That landed quietly, but deeply. "Can you defend me?" I asked. "Yes," he said immediately. "But I need everything. Every document you have access to, especially anything your grandfather left outside standard estate files." That made me pause slightly. "The executor protection addendum." There was a longer silence this time. "Then you have that?" "Yes, bring it." Something in his tone changed, not excitement, attention sharpening. "That's not standard language." That might be the key piece. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I'll bring everything tomorrow." "Good, and Claire?" "Yeah." "Stop engaging your family directly. From this point forward, everything goes through documentation." I looked at my phone again, the missed calls, the messages, the pressure building quietly across every channel. "I already am," I said. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't fully true yet, not until I cut the emotional line completely. The next morning, the courthouse felt different when I arrived. Not busier, heavier. Like something had already started moving without me overnight. Mason was waiting outside. He didn't shake my hand, just nodded. "Let's go inside." We went straight to a private conference room he had reserved. When I laid everything out on the table, his expression didn't change much at first. He went through it methodically, folder by folder, page by page, no emotional reactions, just analysis. That alone calmed me more than anything else had in days. Then he reached the addendum. He stopped, looked at it longer than anything else. "This," he said finally, "was not written casually. I figured." He leaned back slightly. "Claire, your grandfather didn't just anticipate disputes. He anticipated methodology. What does that mean? It means he expected manipulation of narrative, not just disagreement over assets." That phrase again. Narrative. Everything kept circling that same idea. Mason tapped the paper once. "This clause, no verbal requests are valid, isn't just legal instruction, it's a containment rule." Containment? Yes. It restricts informal influence over executor decisions, which means anything outside documented channels can be challenged as invalid pressure. I sat forward slightly. "So if someone pressured me verbally to move money, they've already created grounds for dispute," he finished. I felt something shift in my chest. Slow, not emotional, structural. "So he knew," I said quietly. Mason nodded. "Or suspected strongly enough to prepare for it." He flipped to the attachment reference. "This is what I want to find next." "What is it?" "If this estate has a secondary file structure, something not disclosed in initial probate filing, it will likely be referenced here." He looked at me directly. "And if it exists, it will redefine the entire case." A silence settled between us. Then he added, "But Claire, I need to prepare you for something." I didn't like the tone. "What?" "If there's coordinated narrative building happening, the next step is usually escalation through witnesses." I frowned. "Witnesses? Family members confirming claims publicly or legally." My stomach tightened slightly. "You think they'll testify against me?" "I think," he said carefully, "they've already started rehearsing versions of events that support the petition." I looked down at my hands. This wasn't just accusation anymore. It was construction. And I was now standing in the middle of a structure being built around me without my input. Mason closed the folder. "Now we do the only thing that matters." "What's that?" "We follow the paper trail exactly as it exists. No interpretation, no emotion, just sequence." He stood. "And then we wait for it to contradict itself." That word stayed with me. Contradict. Because somewhere in this mess, the truth wasn't missing. It was just buried under competing versions of it. That afternoon, the first contradiction appeared, not in court, not in legal filings, but in something small. A message from Ethan again, this time different. "I need to tell you something. Call me when you can." I stared at it for a long moment, then called him. He answered quickly, but he didn't sound the same. Lower voice, less confident. "Claire, I don't think this is what everyone thinks it is." My grip tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" A pause, then, "I saw Mom and Aunt Denise talking at the diner yesterday. They had printed bank summaries." I went still. "That's impossible. Those aren't public." "I don't know how they got them, but they were discussing specific figures." That mattered, because it meant access, or fabrication, or selective documentation. Ethan continued. "And they weren't just talking. They were deciding what parts to show people." My throat tightened slightly. "Ethan, listen to me carefully. Did you see where those documents came from?" "No," another pause, "but I saw something else." "What?" He hesitated. Then, "They said the court filing needs more supporting voices before next hearing." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was, witness preparation. Exactly what Mason warned about. When I opened my eyes again, everything felt sharper. Not emotional, precise. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "Claire, I don't want to be involved in this." "You're not involved," I said. "Not yet." Then he added, "I think Grandpa left something behind. Something nobody's talking about." My breath slowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "He used to say things like, 'If I ever can't speak for myself, the paperwork will.'" I didn't respond immediately, because I already knew that tone. That wasn't rumor. That was intention passed down verbally, and now it was aligning with the documents. "I have to go," I said finally. "Claire," but I had already ended the call. I sat there in silence for a long moment, then looked at Mason's folder beside me. at the contradictions forming just beneath the surface. I felt something close to certainty, that the truth had already been written down somewhere. By the time I left Mason's office that afternoon, I wasn't thinking like someone defending herself anymore. I was thinking like someone trying to survive a story that had already been told about her. And worse, already believed. The courthouse parking lot was half full, sunlight too bright for how heavy everything felt. I sat in my car for a few seconds before starting the engine. My phone buzzed again, then stopped. I didn't check it right away. Instead, I just watched people walk in and out of the courthouse steps. Normal lives moving in and out of legal buildings like nothing was breaking underneath them. Then I saw her, my mother, standing near the entrance, talking to someone I didn't recognize, not emotional, like she belonged there, like she had already been there. That was the first moment something inside me shifted from defense into observation. I didn't get out of the car. I just watched. That evening, I got the first official court notice. It arrived by certified mail. Stamped, structured language, the kind of document that doesn't argue, it declares. I opened it at my kitchen table. Petition for temporary restriction of executor authority. Filed by Patricia Morgan. Supported by concerned family statements. Hearing scheduled. 6 days. My hand didn't shake. That was the strange part. If this had been emotional chaos, I would have broken down somewhere along the way. But it wasn't chaos. It was coordinated procedure. And procedure meant something important. It meant it could be answered. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered immediately this time. A woman's voice, clerk-level tone. Miss Morgan, this is regarding the probate case filing. Yes. There has been an additional submission of supporting affidavits from family members. You may request copies through your attorney. I will. A pause. Then she added something that didn't sound scripted. Just be prepared. This case is drawing a lot of attention for a small estate. That sentence confirmed what Mason had already implied. This wasn't normal probate conflict anymore. It had become a narrative case. A story people were choosing sides in, not based on evidence, but proximity, family loyalty, and repetition. After she hung up, I sat there for a long time. Then I called Ethan. He picked up after 2 rings. Claire, are you okay? A pause. Not really. I closed my eyes briefly. Did they ask you to sign anything? Silence. That silence told me everything before he even spoke. Yes, my stomach tightened. What kind of document? Statement of concern about Grandpa's accounts near the end. I leaned back in my chair. Ethan, did you see any accounts? No. Did you review anything? No. They just said it's just confirming what everyone already knows. That phrase again. What everyone already knows. Not truth. Consensus. I exhaled slowly. That's not how legal statements work. I know, he said quietly. I didn't want to sign it. But you did. Another pause. Mom said it would help stop this from going to court. That hit harder than it should have, because it revealed something important. This wasn't just accusation, it was persuasion. Family pressure disguised as resolution. I spoke carefully. Ethan, listen to me. Did anyone explain where the financial information came from? No, they just showed me printouts. Bank records? I think so. I don't know. My grip tightened slightly on the phone. And you believe they're real? I don't know what to believe anymore. That was the real damage. I lowered my voice. Thank you for telling me. That matters. Claire, are you actually okay in all this? That question caught me off guard, not because it was deep, because it was simple, and no one had asked it like that yet. I'm functioning, I said finally. That was the most honest answer I had. The next morning, Mason called before I even got out of bed. We have a problem, he said immediately. I sat up. What happened? They've escalated filings. Already? Yes. And this time, it's not just your mother. That made me pause. What do you mean? 3 additional family affidavits submitted overnight. I closed my eyes. Denise, Ethan. And they're consistent. Consistent how? They all reference the same allegation pattern. I stood up slowly. Which is early access, emotional manipulation, informal control over accounts. I didn't respond immediately, because I recognized the structure. It wasn't just repetition. It was alignment. Different people repeating a coordinated version of events. That meant one thing. They had been briefed. Mason's voice lowered slightly. There's something else. Tell me. They've requested temporary freeze on discretionary access to estate accounts pending review. I went still. If granted, you lose operational control until hearing. That's 6 days from now. Yes. Silence. Then I said quietly, so the goal is delay. Yes. To what end? Mason didn't answer immediately, and when he did, his tone was careful. To make your position look unstable before you ever present evidence. That was it. The structure became visible now. They weren't trying to prove me guilty. They were trying to make me look questionable long enough for doubt to stick. That's how reputations collapse, not instantly. Gradually, through repetition. Through absence of counterweight, I sat back down on the edge of my bed. What do I do? Same as before, he said. We don't argue narrative, we build timeline integrity. Meaning, every claim they've made has to be matched against documentation. And if it doesn't match, then it becomes contradiction. That word again. Contradiction, he continued. Claire, I need you to understand something very clearly. I'm listening. This case is no longer about inheritance. I already knew what was coming before he said it. It's about credibility assignment inside a family system. I closed my eyes briefly, because that part was real, more real than any bank record, more real than any legal filing. Families don't always fight over money. They fight over who gets believed. 2 days before the hearing, everything shifted again, not legally, socially. I walked into the grocery store and someone turned away from me mid-aisle, not dramatically, just enough. The cashier scanned my items without speaking. At the pharmacy, my prescription was delayed for verification for the first time ever. At the diner, my usual booth was suddenly reserved. Every interaction was slightly altered, like a script had been updated and I wasn't given the new version. Then I saw it, on the community Facebook group, pinned post, not accusation this time, announcement. Concerned family members will be presenting formal statements regarding estate oversight concerns at upcoming probate hearing. No mention of me by name. They didn't need it anymore. Everyone knew. I closed the app immediately, because now I understood something important. This wasn't just legal escalation. It was public preparation. They were normalizing doubt before the hearing even happened, so that whatever I said later would feel like defense, not truth. That night, Ethan texted me again. I don't think Mom is telling the whole truth. I stared at that message for a long time. Neither side ever is. A pause, then, I just don't know what I'm supposed to believe anymore. I typed slowly. Then don't believe, just watch the documents. And I meant it, because at this point, belief was the wrong system entirely. The only thing that mattered now was what could be proven without interpretation. The night before the hearing, I drove to Grandpa's house again. I didn't tell anyone, didn't plan anything dramatic. I just needed the files. I went straight to the office, opened the cabinet, pulled out everything Mason had flagged. Then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A second envelope, tucked behind the drawer lining, not labeled, just sealed, my name written on it. My breath slowed slightly. I didn't open it immediately. Because in families like mine, sealed things are never just information. They're timing devices. And I knew instinctively that whatever was inside it was meant for this exact moment. Grandpa hadn't just prepared for disagreement. He had prepared for me being isolated inside it. And whatever came next was going to change the direction of everything that had happened so far. The courthouse felt colder on the day of the hearing. Socially, people weren't looking at me openly anymore. They were looking around me, like direct contact might make them part of something messy. Mason met me near the entrance. No small talk, just a brief nod. Stick to documents. Nothing else matters today, I nodded. My mother was already there, seated neatly, hands folded. My father beside her, staring at the table like it had answers. Denise sat a row behind them. And that's when I noticed something that tightened my chest slightly. There were more people than I expected. Family, not all immediate, cousins, extended relatives, even someone from Grandpa's old business circle. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It had become a public sorting. The judge entered. Everything shifted into place. Formal, controlled, coldly procedural. Mason stood first. Your Honor, We are here regarding a petition to temporarily restrict executor authority based on alleged financial irregularities. My mother's attorney followed immediately. Multiple family members have submitted consistent concerns regarding premature access and informal handling of estate-related funds. I felt eyes shift briefly toward me, not hostility. Curiosity shaped as judgment. Then Mason responded, "We will demonstrate that all estate accounts remained unchanged prior to filing, and that all claims of financial movement are factually unsupported." The judge raised a hand slightly. "Evidence." That single word changed the room. Mason placed documents on the table. "I would like to submit complete account histories from the relevant period." My mother's attorney objected once, but weakly, because the structure of their claim depended on implication, not contradiction-proof data. The judge reviewed quietly. Minutes passed. No one spoke. Then, "Accounts show no withdrawals outside authorized estate preservation limits," the judge said. A pause. I felt something shift behind me. A chair moved slightly. Denise, not visible fully, but I felt it. Mason didn't stop there. "Additionally, Your Honor, we would like to address the affidavits submitted." He turned a page. Each affidavit references early access to funds without identifying specific transactions. Another page. And each statement uses identical phrasing patterns. That caught attention. Even the judge looked up slightly. Mason continued, "This suggests coordinated language rather than independent observation." A quiet shift in the room, not dramatic, but noticeable. My father looked down harder at the table. My mother didn't move, but her hands tightened slightly. Then Mason said something that changed the tone completely. "We also submit the Executor Protection Addendum, drafted by the deceased, explicitly requiring all claims of irregularity to be supported by documented transactional evidence." He placed it down. The room went still. The judge read, longer this time. When he spoke again, his tone was different. "Was this part of the original estate filing?" "Yes," Mason said, "but it was not referenced in the initial petition by opposing counsel." That mattered. The judge leaned back slightly, then asked something simple. "Who authored the affidavits?" My mother's attorney shifted. "Family members of the deceased." The judge looked down again, then up. "Were they independently prepared?" A pause. That pause was louder than anything else in the room. Then Mason added quietly, "We have reason to believe the affidavits were prepared using shared reference language." Now the silence changed shape. It wasn't emotional anymore. It was evaluative. The judge closed the file slightly. "Court will take a short recess." Gavel. The room exhaled all at once, but I didn't move, because I saw something I hadn't seen before. My mother finally looked at me, directly. Not angry, not confident, measured, like she was recalculating something. That was the first crack. In the hallway, Mason spoke quietly. "They didn't expect the addendum to be admissible this early." "What does that mean?" "It means your grandfather anticipated procedural escalation. This document forces evidentiary standards they weren't prepared to meet yet." I nodded slowly. "So what now?" "Now they either adjust their claim or collapse it." From behind us, I heard footsteps. My father. He stopped a few feet away. "Claire," he said quietly. I turned slightly. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "This is getting out of control." I didn't respond immediately, because I realized something in that moment. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't attacking me. He was overwhelmed by the breakdown of certainty. "I didn't start it," I said finally. He nodded once. "I know." That surprised me slightly, but then he added, "I just don't know what's true anymore." That was the real damage, not accusation. Confusion inside a system that used to feel stable. Before I could respond, Denise appeared behind him. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Truth is what people can agree on. And right now, people are agreeing on concern. Mason stepped slightly closer to me. The judge returned before anything else could escalate. Everyone moved back into the room. The atmosphere had changed. Not lighter, more focused. The judge spoke immediately. "After reviewing submitted documentation, the court finds no immediate evidence supporting restriction of executor authority." A pause. Then, "The petition for temporary restriction is denied." It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, No reaction from the bench, just procedure completing itself, but I felt the shift instantly. My mother didn't speak. Denise didn't either. Mason leaned slightly toward me. "One step," he said quietly. "Now we follow the paper trail further." I nodded. I didn't open the sealed envelope until I was alone in Grandpa's office again. The house felt different after the hearing. Not quieter, just unguarded. Like something had already shifted and hadn't fully settled yet. The envelope was still in my hands when I sat down at his desk. My name written on it in his handwriting. Not rushed, not decorative, intentional. I slid it open carefully. Inside was a single folded letter and a second smaller packet labeled, "If this reaches you, then it's already started." That sentence alone tightened something in my chest. I unfolded the letter first. "Claire, if you are reading this, then the estate has become what I expected it might become. Not a financial disagreement. A disagreement about memory, about perception, about who gets believed. I've seen this family long enough to know that truth alone doesn't survive pressure. Documentation does. That is why I structured everything the way I did." I stopped for a second, not because I was emotional, because the tone was too calm for what it was saying. I continued, "You are not being accused because you are wrong. You are being accused because you are the only one in position to be tested. That will feel personal. It is not. It is structural. Everything you will need has already been recorded, time-stamped, and duplicated outside of family access. If disputes escalate to affidavits, cross-check every claim against account logs dated before and after my hospitalization period. You will find what I found. Patterns do not lie. People do. The room felt still. Even the air felt like it had slowed. I opened the second packet. Inside were printed pages, not emotional notes, not explanations, ledger comparisons, bank activity summaries, transaction timelines, and one page that made me pause completely. A side-by-side breakdown. Authorized access versus informal request attempts below it entries, names redacted in some places, but not all. My mother's name appeared once, Denise twice. Each entry matched a time-stamped request that never resulted in actual financial movement. But the wording beside them was what mattered. Verbal urgency applied. Family expectation referenced. Emotional justification attempted. I leaned back slowly. He hadn't just recorded finances. He had recorded pressure patterns, not to punish, to predict. My phone buzzed. I didn't look at it immediately. I already knew what it would be, and I was right. Mason. "Check your email now." I opened it. One attachment, court supplement filing. I clicked it, and read the subject line. "Request for narrative consistency review based on documented transactional records." I exhaled slowly, because that wasn't defensive language anymore. That was reversal language. Mason had taken Grandpa's documentation and turned it into an active challenge to every affidavit submitted. I walked back into the living room without thinking, sat down, watched the wall for a moment. Then my phone rang again. My mother, I answered, silence first, then her voice. Different this time, less controlled, still composed but thinner. "You didn't need to turn this into something legal." I didn't respond immediately. Then I said quietly, "It was already legal." A pause, then, "Do you even understand what you've done to this family?" That word again, family, used like it still held authority. "I didn't do anything," I said. "You refused to help. That's not what happened." Another pause, then her voice sharpened slightly. "You let them look at me like I fabricated all of this." That's when I realized something important. She wasn't arguing truth. She was arguing perception of truth. "I didn't control what you submitted," I said. "You're his executor," she snapped. "You controlled everything." "No," I said quietly. "I controlled nothing. I documented everything." Silence again. Then softer, "You always were like him." That landed differently. Not insult, not praise, comparison. Then the call ended. I sat there for a long time after that, not moving, not reacting, just listening to the quiet that followed. Because something had changed. Not in the accusation, not in the court, but in the family system itself. The certainty had broken. 3 weeks later, the estate review concluded. No fraud findings, no mismanagement, no restrictions. Just closure. But that wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was what happened after. Denise stopped speaking publicly. My father stopped asking questions he didn't have answers for. My mother didn't apologize, not directly. But one afternoon, she left a folder on my porch. No note. Inside were copies of earlier affidavits, each one marked in pen, based on incomplete understanding. Not an admission, but a quiet correction. Ethan called once more, just to say, "I think I see it differently now." And that was it. No grand reconciliation, no emotional resolution, just recalibration. Months later, I went through Grandpa's office one last time. Everything was still labeled, still structured, still exact. But I noticed something I hadn't before. On the inside of the filing cabinet door, barely visible unless you looked closely, he had written one final line. Not financial, not legal, just human. If they argue about the truth, make them show their work. I closed the cabinet slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying a case. I felt like I was carrying something simpler. Clarity, not victory. Not revenge, just clarity. People still talk in town. That doesn't really stop, but it changes shape. Now when someone mentions the estate, they don't say, "She took money." They say, "That wasn't what happened, apparently." And apparently is sometimes the closest thing families get to agreement. I didn't win anything. I didn't lose anything either. What I got back was quieter than that. My name, unreframed, unfiltered, unassigned. And in families like mine, that's rare enough to count as resolution. If you were in my position, would you have handled it the same way? Would you have confronted your family directly, or let the paper trail speak for you? And be honest, do you think people like this ever truly apologize or just quietly rewrite the story afterward? I read every comment, because every family has a version of this story. Most just never say it out loud.